Hey, we have plenty of superhero games, and most modern ones are considered great. The Spider-Man games, the Guardians of the Galaxy game, the Infamous games. But before comic book superheroes and comic book stories really popped off and went mainstream, there were plenty of superhero games way back when, and in between, that are worth talking about, flaws and all. We got 10 cool games to talk about today, so let's get started off with number 10. Spider-Man Web of Shadows. We're starting with an obvious one. I know if you watch gameranx, you know that we love this one. We've talked about it a lot, and among Spider-Man fans, it is notorious. But with mainstream audiences, Spider-Man Web of Shadows is kind of forgotten. It got middling reviews. Tech-wise, it released in a pretty poor state. The game did not look very good. It performed very poorly, but it was awesome. This game was incredible, switching between regular Spidey and symbiote Spidey, fighting off against a bunch of villains, Venom trying to essentially take over New York City. You meet up with a bunch of awesome other Marvel characters like Wolverine, Luke Cage. You could choose if you want to be a good Spider-Man or a bad Spider-Man. You could infect Wolverine with the symbiote. Like, you could turn Wolverine into like an evil symbiote Wolverine, and his design was so cool. There were a lot of creative elements to this game, and I think when people play the new Spider-Man 2 game, which, you know, is centered around Venom trying to take over New York City, they don't realize that's kind of like Web of Shadows. I mean, Web of Shadows is kind of like the busted version, but also it was really cool. It had some compelling aerial combat, a New York City that got progressively worse and worse as the game went on. There were a lot of good ideas behind this one. Spider-Man Web of Shadows, to some Spider-Man fans, some weirdos like me, will forever be considered one of the better games. Yes, it is extremely flawed, but I love it to this day. Next, over at number 9, we have X2, Wolverine's Revenge. This game went like crazy mode. This was like a spin-off movie tie-in game. Remember those? Remember when every movie would have a weird spin-off video game, and every superhero movie would have a weird spin-off game, and they were usually crappy. I'm thinking about the Thor video game. But with X2, Wolverine's Revenge, they didn't just decide to try and recreate the movie and make this messy, half-assed thing. They kind of just made a Wolverine game. Yeah, like very, very vaguely connected to the X2 movie, but really, it felt more like something ripped out of the pages of a comic book with a bunch of cool characters featured that you would never see in an X-Men movie. You got to play as Wolverine, of course, like going out for revenge, but also different periods of his life, like in the Weapon X program, escaping. Sometimes you have an X-Men outfit, sometimes you're doing just plainclothes Logan stuff, but it just got progressively more over the top as the game went on, and it was cool. Also, Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker, and the Joker voice actor did the voice for Wolverine in this game. And you know what? It works. It's actually pretty cool. Is it a little cheesy? Yes. But this was a cheesy comic book video game. It certainly didn't play the best. It wasn't like the most compelling gameplay ever, but we still just look back and really appreciate it. Next at number 8, we're jumping back just a few years to 2020 with Iron Man VR. Now, there's a new Iron Man game in the works from EA and Motive. It's apparently just going to be a big old AAA Iron Man game. People are very excited about that, but with that announcement, people very quickly forgot about the pretty good Iron Man VR game. It released for PSVR and ultimately was then ported to other things like MetaQuest, but it's actually a really good Iron Man experience. It sounds like a corny, cliched phrase, but it does actually make you feel like Iron Man. You're controlling flight with your hands, with thrusters. You're saving people falling out of an airplane, like you're flying around three-dimensional spaces. Yes, it tried really hard to copy the Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man vibe, kind of to a corny degree, but the actual gameplay feel, the experience of like blowing up robots and stuff with repulsor blasts, was very, very cool. I did the before you buy review video on this game, and I remember walking away really enjoying it. It had some issues, and visually, graphically, it didn't look the greatest, but the feeling was there. It gave me the superhero feel, but unfortunately, it feels like this one just quickly came and went. Next, over at number 7, we have Guardians of the Galaxy. Not the one from Square Enix, no, the Telltale series one. This one is completely forgotten by a lot of people, but I played this one, and it was okay. It's hard not to compare it to the newer game, but it's very much a Telltale game, so it's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward, and it's about telling a story of your classic Guardians of the Galaxy characters. It's not like completely aping the James Gunn MCU thing, but it kind of is. It had a decent soundtrack, but the character designs, I don't know, something about this Star-Lord always rubbed me the wrong way. He just looks kind of weird. This wasn't necessarily a bad game by any means, but it was also when Telltale was just pumping out all kinds of stuff, and after a while it kind of was hard to keep track. And unfortunately, with the closure of like the original Telltale studios and licensing issues, this game is kind of lost to time. I mean, if you own it, you can still access it, but it's not out there for anyone to buy it, at least not digitally, as far as I know. Next, over at number 6, we have Captain America Super Soldier, a game releasing in the early, humble beginnings of the MCU. This was based loosely on the first Captain America movie, Captain America: The First Avenger. It released in 2011, and despite being a movie tie-in game, it just kind of did its own thing. You were World War II era Captain America in Nazi Germany, and you're in Hydra's castle running around doing Captain America stuff. It's kind of got like a little bit of an Arkham Metroidvania style to it, with you exploring these open areas and punching dudes. But there was a lot of cool stuff in it. There was a lot more Hydra. Hydra's castle is like the whole thing. Arnim Zola shows up, Iron Cross, and the characters from the movies, like the main characters, like, you know, Steve Rogers, Chris Evans, did voices. Sure, it was a little dull, it was a little bland, but like as a Captain America fan, I was happy to just have this. It was at least fairly decent. You could do all the famous Steve Rogers flips and jumps and punches, and that made me happy. You could throw a shield. Sometimes that's all you need. Next at number 5, we have the Batman Begins game from 2005. Yeah, remember this one? This was essentially the end of a long, dark period. A period where as kids, all we got was mediocre Batman games. There are tons. They're just littering the graveyards. But Batman Begins kind of was like an upward trajectory. It was okay. It was still kind of mediocre, but it was essentially like one of the last things before Batman Arkham Asylum changed everything. But Batman Begins the game had the benefit of at least being based on Batman Begins the movie. One of my favorite movies ever. And boy, did it not really capture the feel of that movie at all. Batman in this game kind of moves around and looks like a total goofball. Graphically, at the time, some of this actually looked pretty damn good, and that helped with things. Also, some really cool Tumblr Batmobile sequences. But unfortunately, this released in the time when movie tie-in games were usually considered really bad, so even if Batman Begins wasn't the worst, it was quickly written off. Next, down at number 4, we have Marvel's Ultimate Alliance 3, The Black Order. This one is forgotten about because, to be honest, it only released on Switch. It's only on Nintendo Switch. The other 2 Ultimate Alliance games were incredible, awesome multi-platform Marvel brawler games, but when it finally came back around years and years later, when this released in 2019, it was a Nintendo Switch exclusive. It got a little bit of a lighter, brighter art style, and to be honest, it was actually a pretty good game. I don't know if I loved it as much as the originals, but it was still a good time, and frankly, I considered it kind of underrated. But it is absolutely wild when you look at like the gaming world, the gaming conversations, even top 10 gaming lists like this, you never hear about Ultimate Alliance 3. And that's a damn shame because it is good, like I said, and I just really want more Ultimate Alliance games. I'm still holding out hope for an Ultimate Alliance 4. Are we ever gonna see it? I don't know, but at least we got these 3. Next, over at number 3, we have Marvel Nemesis, Rise of the Imperfects. This was a time when I think video game executives were doing a ton of cocaine and flying too close to the sun. This 2005 game was like EA's big Marvel thing, and it ultimately ended up being considered mostly a disaster. It was a good idea on paper, at least. It was like a little bit of a darker tinged Marvel game, which made sense around this time, going for a little bit of an edgy impact. And it kind of had like brawler fighter mechanics that could have been a lot of fun, but ultimately the game released to pretty middling reviews, and I don't think many reviews out there gave it more than a 5 out of 10. The story stuff was really goofy. The new story elements and like a character they introduced felt like really overhyped. And yeah, I don't know about this one. Even the characters that were like made for this game, like the EA characters, have never really showed up in anything else ever again. They actually made a comic book spin-off with this, like written by Greg Pak, a famous comic book author. Like this was a big deal. It was like this tie-in thing, but apparently like it didn't even work and mesh with the story in the game. It was just like a big fat mess. Did EA learn their lesson with this one? I don't know. But this is one of those weird games that like some people still have nostalgia for. Some people got the PSP version when they were young and they have fond memories. I respect that, but this is a superhero game that's often forgotten by people, and maybe for good reason, but still I just think it's like an interesting video game industry story behind it. Next at number 2, we have the Punisher game. This was THQ published, developed by Volition, the people behind Saints Row and Red Faction. Rest in peace to them. But the Punisher game was absolutely awesome. It came out around the time of the Thomas Jane Punisher movie and featured Thomas Jane as the voice of Frank Castle in this, but it was very much rooted in the comic books. This was a comic book Frank Castle doing comic book ass stuff. You're encountering OG Nick Fury, Tony Stark Iron Man, getting into all sorts of hijinks with a very simple but fun third-person shooter that was pretty brutal. There was a torture mechanic. You could grab anybody you wanted and torture them. You know, push their face in a bowl of hot soup or you know, hold them over a dock where there's a shark trying to eat them, shove a guy's head in a car door, do whatever you want. You could really kind of push the analog stick to see how far you could push it to get information. And it was a cool mechanic. This game was just awesome. I still look back on this game with fond memories. I know in the gaming crowd, like, some people really have a lot of reverence for this one, like myself, but if you ask a lot of people out there that love the Punisher today and love those stickers or love the Netflix show, they don't even know this game exists. Now down at number 1, we figured we'd mention it because there's a movie coming out soon, the Deadpool game. Yeah, a Deadpool game released way back in 2013, and it was actually pretty good. Nolan North did the voice of Deadpool, and it really kind of had some good Deadpool energy before the movies took the world by storm. This had all kinds of bits with famous Marvel characters, including Cable and Wolverine, and it was made by High Moon Studios, so like they knew what they were doing. They made a fun, simple, third-person shooter brawler adventure that had a lot of variety to it, creativity, and some good jokes. Yes, they were very of the time, very early 2000s goofy stuff, but it was just a good, solid Deadpool adventure, and I think I would totally recommend it still. If you're a fan of Deadpool, maybe just even with the new movies, this game would probably satisfy you. Apparently it's been removed off of all the digital stores because Activision lost its license, but like, it is a really cool, good Marvel superhero time. But because of like the way licensing and our digital future hellscape works, it's kind of been erased from history. But hey, those are 10 superhero games that some people tend to forget. We wanted to talk about some different ones today. We're used to always talking about the same old games, so let me know what you think. Let me know if we missed some games. There are plenty more we could talk about down in the comments, so hit us up. Are you like me? Did you play Captain America, Super Soldier? Did you play Marvel Nemesis, Rise of the Imperfects? Do you have fond memories torturing people in the Punisher game? Let's talk about any of this stuff down in the comments. Now, if you like this video, clicking the like button helps us out. We talk games every single day. But as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.